Everybody, welcome to the Collective. We have another awesome show for you today. But before I go anywhere, before we do anything,
What is even going on?
just
Looks. What is
run here.
happening?
Look at
Which
that hair.
way should I move it? I don't even know. It looks like he got styled by a hand grenade. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, could be. Looks like you just took like a thunder flash to the face. I don't. You could do the comb over and kind of look like the Unabomber.
What is even going on?
Where's the toque, man? I don't know.
I look like some sort of mad professor.
Right? You look like that theoretical physics dude that just like comes running out of his office like, I just figured something.
For sure. Quantum mechanics.
Well, while he's fixing his hair, first off, make sure everybody likes, subscribes, and hits the notification bell because we are gonna have a great chat today. I have some topics.
Good.
Some very good topics. Oh, Winterstorm, morning.
Morning. Haven't seen you a bit, buddy.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's been slacking, not following us, not watching every show. I mean, really.
How embarrassing.
Right? So I have a few things. So we can go into story time. We can go into questions from the interwebs, or we can go into philosophy right off the bat. Which one do you want?
I would say questions from the interwebs. I just did a little bit of low rent philosophy with Jason Sabakowicz.
Saw that
over on my live chat. Seems like a good dude, right?
Yeah. We'll get him on here. We'll be able to have a good long chat.
Good.
So we'll go for the questions from the internet. So I don't know if anybody saw it on the Instagram. I put up on my notes if anybody has any thoughts or questions or things that they want to discuss. And I figured, ask the world, right? And if they want to hear us talk about something, they'll tell us. And so I got this really good one right off the bat. Are you ready?
Oh, you got one right away?
Oh yeah, right away.
Oh, nice.
Here it is. The fear of transitioning out of the forces and the unknown of what you want to do next. And I thought that was a great topic for discussion. He goes a little bit into it. I won't go too deep into that one right now because that's more. It's an old friend of mine that is now. He's just finishing up 22 plus years in the forces.
Jack.
People are asking him like, "Oh, what are you going to do next? You going to go to school? You going to go do these things? You going to do blah blah blah?" And he's sitting there just like, I don't even know where to go. Doesn't even know what to start with. So let's dive into it. You did 20, right? You did 20 some odd years. 20.
Nope, I only did 13.
Only did 13. You know, I have to say, this is something that I've had to get out of my vocabulary when talking about time in the military.
I know. I said only
and just.
Yeah.
And it is something that we need to step away from, I think, because all time of service is
as soon as I said it, I knew I'd blew in it.
Yeah. So
botched.
Got to keep you accountable.
Dummy,
again,
Shaun.
Warrant officers got to be
held.
the Master Corporal keeping the warrant in check. Here we go.
Please do. You wouldn't be the first.
That's right. And so here's the issue. I mean, for myself, getting out after 8 years, I was looking forward to getting out because I was pretty tired and pretty done, pretty burnt out. But for yourself, what was that initial like? It's time to go. What was that feeling like?
Oh, it was challenging.
Yeah.
For me. I mean, yeah, it was challenging because I was in JTF too. And I mean, who wants to leave that?
Yeah.
So it was challenging. The transition out of the military to the civilian world as a veteran was challenging. And that's why I had to throw down a 4-inch thick steel wall that snapped shut right behind me as I stepped my first step out on the civilian street, and I did not look in the rearview mirror. That's what pushed me forward as hard as I pushed forward, is the fact, it's not that I didn't blow all the bridges behind me or burn the boats so that you can't, evacuate in the boats or whatever. It wasn't any of that. It was just, I put a do not look back protocol in place. I only looked forward, and that was the only way that I could manage it.
That's a great point. And
I said that's the only way I could manage it. There's many ways I could have managed it, but that's the only way I could manage it at that point, because that's the only thing I could think of to do at the time in order to move forward. I
Yeah.
didn't have a handbook. There's no one telling me try option A, B, C, A, B, C. I didn't have any of that. I just sat down and thought, how the hell am I going to do this?
Mhm.
What I came up.
So here's a question for you then. What was the the process, I guess, the mindset, the process of going, I'm doing this awesome work. I'm having lots of fun. This is good stuff. Was it I want to do something else, or was it I don't really want to do this anymore? Like, was it to seek elsewhere, or just to get out of where you were?
Yeah, it's a good question. And there was a number of things going on at the time. And so, I mean, one of the reasons was my marriage was collapsing because I
Mm,
was hardly ever at home because of this, because of that, all kinds of things. Hard to explain to your wife when you come back and she says, "Where were you?" And you say, "How's the lawn?
yeah.
Where are you going next? Do you know what the weather's going to be like tomorrow?" And so, I manage it the best? No, I didn't. Am I an idiot? Always. But it was just one thing of many things combined that made me choose, I've got to bounce.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one. The family life. I mean, within the reg forces, I don't want to say the divorce rate, but the I guess the failure of relationship rate is quite high. And I can imagine every time you step up a tier when you're gone longer, you're gone. You're more part of that team than the home team. It becomes harder and harder and harder to maintain relationships at home when you are never there.
Yeah,
So
and I was hardly ever there.
yeah, I can imagine. the the one I guess the further question in here, I guess the deeper question is, at least what I've read from this, is that he doesn't really have any answers. And one of the things I told him was that that's okay. You don't have to have answers. You just have to be willing to start trying stuff.
You
But
don't need answers. You need questions.
questions, there you go. That's it. And I really like that. But for those that are struggling, that are seeking an answer or a location, or like, I need this or that or the other thing. I used one of your colloquialisms.
Perfect. It's
um,
working.
it is. In order to, let's say, to get over that hump of where you kind of get paralysis by analysis, when you're like, well, there's so many options, and maybe that, then what? Where do you go?
Yeah. So, I think the something I was talking about yesterday in my live chat was get out in nature,
Hmm.
sit down. In fact, I describe meditation as such because I wasn't, I'm still not a guy who thinks I meditate, though I do. I just don't call it meditation. And so in my live chat yesterday, I actually described how to meditate. And I took some time. It's about, I don't know, maybe a 40-minute long conversation about who are you? And so this is absolutely relevant to your pal now who's struggling with not who he is right now, but who he's going to be in the near future.
Hmm.
Before he jumps into the unknown, before whatever he chooses, whatever career or hobby or path or solution, get to know yourself. And most people don't know who they are at their core. They just don't know. They know what they can do. I can blow things up. I can climb buildings. I can go down buildings. I can fly planes. I can jump out of planes. Everyone knows things. Everyone does do,
Hmm.
but not many know who they are. They know what their label says. I'm a
Hmm.
pathfinder, but that's not who you are. That's just a thing from the history books. It's not who you are right now. And that's the trick. Most people don't get in touch with their now. And so that's the very first thing that he should consider is getting in touch with himself at a deeper level. Contemplate who he is and contemplate what he wants, contemplate what he likes, contemplate what he doesn't like, but not just in knee-jerk sort of senses. I hate when that guy at Tim Hortons dot dot dot. That's not deep contemplation.
Hmm.
That's just lashing out at all of the white noise stuff. You got to strip out the white noise. You got to sit down and you got to start thinking contemplatively. So, how I described how to do that, I don't know if you heard it, but the paraphrase right at the end was this: I've been doing this a while, but I haven't been doing it long enough that I know exactly how to do it all. I can't describe it. I can't be a meditation master and explain to anyone else how to meditate, because this is how I will tell you how to meditate. Put your boots on, go walk out into the bush, sit on a tree stump, and shut up.
Mm-hmm.
That's meditation, man. Shut up. I don't want to hear you. You shouldn't want to hear you. Just empty your mind, empty your shell, and exist, and see how long you can exist without talking to yourself. Just shut up. And then tomorrow, shut up again. And for the rest of the week, just freaking shut up.
Yeah.
Don't make a freaking noise while you're out there sitting on the tree stump. And then once you've done that, go back home, do your thing, think about things, plan, plot, scheme, whatever. But when you go out in the bush and sit on the tree stump, freaking shut up and just see what shows up. Maybe you'll get to know yourself a little bit deeper. Maybe the peace and quiet in your mind will act as a great reset, even if it's only 5 seconds, so that you can get some instant clarity on what it feels like to just exist with an empty mind, rather than constantly having a mind full of mind that doesn't allow you to be mindful. So for him, I would suggest, if it's any kind of standard issue military career and it's any kind of standard issue military pace, he probably hasn't sat down a whole lot and shut up. And so that's what he needs to do to figure out the future, is my opinion.
I could not agree more. And I was actually going to add on to your point, was that it may take time to figure out who you are. If you've been putting it off for 20, 30 years, be patient. I'll take the time, sit outside, shut your brain hole, allow things to happen. Actually, we went out yesterday. My whole family went to Elk Island.
That's right. That's right.
And we had this great little moment where we found this big open parking lot that was completely empty with a good 1.5 foot worth of snow. And we started tromping through it, and we got to these big open spots. And I was like, "Hey, boys, watch this." And I just straight back into the snow. And then they just started laughing, and they started thump. And then 2 seconds later, thump. And then in 2 seconds, thump. And I just sat there and I listened to it. And I looked just staring up at the sky, listening to the kids giggle and watching the clouds pass over. And I just was quiet. And it was
no need to overcomplicate it.
Exactly. But it takes work. You have to physically go out there. You have to, kind of.
Work. Hang on a sec.
Not work. You need to be intentional. Well, there we go. Yeah, intentional about it.
And the work and you're right to call it work, because that's how army goofs think. That's just how we think.
It is, yeah.
But intention, that costs you nothing, because your day to day, your millisecond to millisecond, we're all branching decisions. We're all always determining what's next: good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. And so it isn't any extra work to think this. I'm going to be present, and see where it goes. That costs you nothing other than the thought. But it's the thought that is the trick. It's the being cognizant that that's what you should be seeking, is to intentionally exist in the real time.
100%. We have a comment here from Rooster 691. Lots of people that wear the uniforms for work rely on that for their identity. And once you hang the uniform up, that core of you is now exposed to the world. That's a great way of putting it. The core of you is now exposed to the world. Because I think that uniform really, I guess we use it to kind of shield ourselves from the world, from being exposed. We use that as it's like a buffer, if that makes any sense.
It does.
And it's true that once you hang that up, it's now you. It's just you in the world.
Now, I would like to just, if you can leave that up, because Rooster 691 brings up a good point, and I get it. And he or she is right that does occur. However, I just like to add a little bit of layer to it and then see what you think. Maybe Rooster will have a follow on. And it's this:
Mm.
once you hang up your uniform, your core is now exposed to the world. Academically, I agree, but experientially, that's not what I've observed. And I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about with others as well. Is your core to some degree is exposed to the world, but it's not your true sense of who you are.
Mm.
You expose your raw emotions, your raw sense of who you are to the world. It gets, once the uniform is off, you're more exposed. But the exposure is more often than not truly who you are, because at that moment in that transitionary period, in that nebulous gray zone, there's a lot of processing that needs to happen. You're going from this to that. And just that alone is enough to create dis-ease, you're uneasy with
Hmm.
what's going on. It's enough to create discomfort. It's enough for you to be not properly calibrated. And so this is the point where the core that's being exposed is maybe not truly who you are. It's the angry you, because maybe you bounced out of the system when you hung up your uniform, and maybe everything was going oh so well year after year, year after year, year after even in your final year, everything went so well. It's so perfect. Everything was awesome. And then as you're clearing out of your unit, one clerk gives you the stink eye and tells you, get out of here, you loser, or
Hmm.
whatever. And that's it. It's all ruined. Maybe for one person. For one person, it all gets ruined because that's what you take away from the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then you attach to that moment and think, screw the army, screw the military, screw this, and screw where I'm going, and screw, and now I'm angry. And I'm not saying that happens every time, but it's been my observation that it happens a lot.
Hmm.
And so when you hang up the uniform, you have that identity. And then when you move onto, as a veteran, onto civilian street, your core is exposed more. But I don't believe that in every instance, it's your true core. The trick is to figure out, once you strip off the veneers of angry or sad or disappointed or whatever, once you strip those out, now you're at your core. And that's what the world will see. But I think initially the world sees some pretty angry people bouncing out of the system.
100%. I actually, while you were talking about this, I got this image. There's this, I think it's an ad on a lot of the some of the stuff I'm doing. I see it regularly on my phone, but it's like it's a globe with a shield kind of around it, and I believe that the core itself is not fully exposed, but there's a gap now, like you were saying, and that can then be picked at and prodded at and poked, and all of a sudden that's where the rage comes from. At least in my experience, Rooster does carry on. The armor you wear is more than just Kevlar and plates, including the weight, which I think is
For
100%
sure.
accurate. Now this goes into what when I was talking about philosophy, it's actually very serendipitous that this all works out very nicely. But
Hey, Rooster, if
yeah,
I just want to say this, that I kind of feel like I could talk about that comment for another day. So if you've
hmm,
got any follow-ons or any whatever, if you've got any thoughts, I'd be curious. So
absolutely.
it's a great question or
For,
comment.
yeah, absolutely. If anybody out there does have questions, comments, put them in here in the comments while you're watching. We'll put them up on the screen. If you don't make it on the comments, by all means, hit me up in the DMs, and I'll get it up on
Stack
here, and
them.
we can actually stack it up and go through them. So, for those that don't know, I've been using this for the last little while, Daily Stoic Journal. It gives you little prompts every day, and you write in it twice a day, first thing in the morning, once in the evening. And today's prompt was, am I standing with the philosopher or the mob? And I thought that was a really great question because what I actually wrote in here, I'll quote it for you guys, is uh, I'm standing with the philosopher, but not apart from the mob, because the mob is made up of us. We're all a part of the mob until we self actualize and start thinking deeper, beyond ourselves. We are one, always, stardust, here for a brief explosion of life and exploration. And the reason I commented
Dude, did you write that?
I did, yeah.
Oh, look at you go. Well done.
Thank you. But the thought I had to go with what we're talking about is that when you're in the army, that's the mob, right? You drink the Kool-Aid, you do the stuff,
The mob rules.
you're in the mob, you're part of that until you can actually stop and look up. And when you stop and look up and you start looking around and go, oh, there's other stuff other than wearing relish to work. Oh, there's other stuff than going to the field every 3 weeks, right? You can, once you start actualizing that and start looking within, then you can explore from there. At least that's my thoughts on it. What are your thoughts?
I think that I could take this many directions, but I'll say this. And I'm trying to be authentic, so I'll stick to my first thought that bubbled up in my head as you were talking. And it was Ryan Flavel's book, The Patrol, that jumped into mind. And it was a specific moment in the book. And I'm not going to describe it, I'll just quickly paraphrase it. He's been on a long patrol. It's been a hard patrol. He's worn out. He's exhausted. He's not confused, but he's not fully in the picture. And he just feels like he's a tiny little cog in the machine of constant burden, we'll call it. And I'm paraphrasing. You got to go read the book. It's a lot more eloquent. I'm not doing it justice, but I'm simply categorizing it as such in order to make this point that at some point in the patrol, he can only look down. Like he's so tired, he's like looking at his feet. And I've seen this time and time again in patrols. The patrolling spirit is the thing that keeps you with your head up and scanning your arcs, but not just scanning your arcs. It's considering the strategic and tactical situation in front of you. You're forward thinking. You're not just a passive participant. You're an active participant if you've got the patrolling spirit. Everyone knows it sucks, but you want to be there because you're into the suck. That's the patrolling spirit. So when you get tired, when you get beaten down and you want to look at your feet, if you've got the patrolling spirit, you look up. And sometimes it's not an affectation. It's not just you're trying to pose by looking up. You're actively looking up. Now you'll be tired and you might not be 100% looking out at your arcs, but you're making your best effort. And if you've got it in you, if you've been in the game long enough, if you've got enough skills, if you've got enough juice, now you're not just looking up, now you're commanding the patrol, and so on and so forth. So I thought about that moment in the book where he was dog tired, beaten down, hard patrol, etc. And he could only look at his feet. And so I think that's the important point. If you want to not step out of the mob, but if you want to see what it looks like outside of the mob, you can't just look at your feet while you're in the mob. You've got to look up. And looking up isn't enough. That's just the first indication that you're going to pay attention. As you look up and start paying attention, now you've got to forward think. Now you've got to activate. Now you've got to get in the game and figure out what is outside of the mob and almost actively step out, look back at it and consider why you're in it, what you're doing in it, what it's doing, et cetera, et cetera. So at that point, if you step out and look back at the mob, it's your opportunity to philosophize.
That's exactly it. That's exactly what I was thinking. And it's kind of hilarious. I'll go into a story from back in the day when I was in high school, which is actually probably when you were running around shooting guns and jumping out of planes.
For sure.
And so I think in grade 10, I was about 6'3". And so I was a lot taller than most of my high school as a whole. And I used to walk between classes, and I would be a good head over top of everybody, which gave me a really interesting view of being able to get to class. I could see how the crowd was moving, and I could kind of
Oh, yeah,
slide in
right.
between
I've
it.
never
And
experienced it.
no, it's a pretty cool feeling. The problem is, this is what happened a couple times actually. As I was walking, I would get hit low, and like I would get shoulder checked as people didn't see me, but from the shorter people in school, because I couldn't see them because they were below the crowd. And so there was
Below
a
your horizon, yeah.
exactly. So there's and that can happen a lot, especially when you come out of the military and you first start looking around. You first start like, oh, okay, I can do things, and I have these skill sets, and I'm gonna be, yeah, let's go get some stuff, and then you get hit from something you didn't see, and that can derail you. Just as you were saying, you get one bad comment, and then you're back in the mob instead of being up in the philosopher zone, right? And being able to look around and being able to, I'm going to use that more often, the philosopher zone. I like that.
It's good.
Being able to look up and continually scan the horizon and look for those holes and look for those gaps that you can slide in between. But you're going to get hit from stuff that you can't see below the waves. That's just
Yeah,
sometimes the
well,
way it is.
it's having a clear view of things.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you're in the forest looking at all the trees, all you see is trees. But if you can climb a tree, now you can see the forest. You were literally a tall tree. And
It's
and
nice.
so the idea being that if you can remove yourself from the obscured view and attain a clear view, that's really all we're talking about, is a clear perspective on what's going on. And to step out of the mob and look back at the mob and recognize it for the mob that it is, and that's cool. You're in the mob. There's nothing wrong with being in a mob. There's nothing
Mhm.
wrong with standing outside the mob, looking at a mob and thinking the mob's fun. I like the mob. The mob's good. I want to be part of the mob again, blah, 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 whatever. But the idea is that when you step and look back at what you're in or what you were in or what you used to be or what you might want to be, that's the point where you've got to philosophize. And philosophize doesn't mean like the dime store philosophizer where you get your super nerd on and think that you're going to crack the mysteries of the universe. Just take a moment
Mhm.
and even ask basic questions like, is that where I belong? Is that where I want to be? Where do I want to be next? If I wasn't there, where would I go? You've got simple questions that aren't the mysteries of the universe. I think that philosophizing or being a philosopher or thinking philosophically is sometimes considered to be, whoa, if you can't quote all of Socrates, then
Yeah.
you ain't a philosopher. I disagree with that. Philosophizing or being a philosopher or a low rent philosopher is just a matter of sit on the tree stump and shut up
Yep.
and then see what you think
Yep.
after you've shut up. And
Yep.
and be curious about yourself. Be curious about the world around you. Be curious about why you're in the mob. Be curious why you like being in the mob. It's those moments where you take the time to not just think mob good.
Mhm.
You've got to think deeper than that. And the only way you'll think deeper is to take the time, make the time, practice making the time to understand the value of time in order to understand where you are and where you might need to go.
Yeah, I could not agree. I've always used the thought that to be a philosopher, you have to be able to ask questions and then listen. And you have to be an active listener to yourself, which is challenging
It's
when you first
challenging,
start.
but that's why every time I do 2 lives per day, I
Mhm.
then rewatch them every day.
Mhm.
I haven't missed a live chat since Jan 1, and I haven't missed reviewing live chats since Jan 1.
Yeah,
The only way to appreciate your mistakes is to review your mistakes.
that's great. Yeah. We were doing that on the mats last night. We were pressure testing for holes on transitions and stuff, and the my professor was sitting there. He was rolling with us, and every time we left a hole open, he would pop out and be like, "Oh, do you see that?" And I'm like, "Yep, saw that. Okay." And then I'd have to make an adjustment because I don't want him to pop out of that hole. But you have to be able to think about it and you take the ego out of it, right? And go, well, I mean, that couldn't have happened if, but no, just
In
okay.
reality.
In reality, yeah,
Oh, so what are you in right now? This non-reality?
this is it right here. But yeah, we could go into depth on this one. We got a Continuing comment from Rooster. Oh, absolutely. I'm restricted in how much I can type at a time, especially at work. This is an extensive subject I seek frequently and went through myself. Absolutely. We could do a year's worth of collective chats on transitioning from the uniform. That is 100%. We could. We do have another one, Hunden, 008. At its essence, philosophy is thinking about thinking. What do you think?
At a cursory glance, I agree, if only for this reason, that if someone reads philosophy is thinking about thinking and it makes them think more, then I'm good with that. Because
Mhm.
in my opinion, philosophy is thinking more, not just thinking. You've got to want more. You've got to be curious. You've got to wonder what's at the bottom of the rabbit hole of whatever thought you have. And so thinking about, is that a rabbit hole? I think it is. Cool. What am I doing next? Oh, I'm over there. That's a cursory glance. That's a cursory thought. You're thinking about a rabbit hole. And I know Hunden already understands this. So
Mhm.
I'm just academically checking off the box of the point. But if you stand on the edge of a rabbit hole and look deep into it and think, I want to know what's at the bottom of that rabbit hole, and then actually start going down it, now you're thinking deeper. Now you're thinking about what can I learn? Now you're thinking about curiously diving deeper into a subject. So thinking about thinking for me isn't enough because we all think
Mhm.
constantly, unless you're sitting on the tree stump and shutting up. And so thinking about thinking, I like it because it makes
Mhm.
me think about the sentence. But the follow on is think deeply. And now it's philosophy.
Yeah. It involves time, right?
Time.
Time and just to sit and think because yeah, I like the way you put that. You can look at a rabbit hole. Wow, that's a rabbit hole. Yep. It's easy enough to do.
Well,
But when
and to not make too fine of a point on it, you can stand on one good jabillion rabbit holes on the edge of it and kick a rock down it and watch it tumble and think, oh, that's another rabbit hole I just dived into.
yeah.
No, no, that's not what you did.
Yeah.
But that's how people can categorize things. That's how people can categorize deep thought
Yeah.
is, dude, I went out and sat on the tree stump for 2 seconds. My arse got wet. I couldn't shut up. I tried meditation. It didn't work.
Mhm.
You thought about it, but you didn't do it. You didn't do it long enough. You didn't go down the rabbit hole deep enough to actually call it a thing. You
Yeah.
didn't meditate. You thought about meditating.
The trick with meditation especially is that there is a connotation to it. There is a there's the monk sitting in the lotus position with the
For
fingers up,
sure.
right? There's that thought initially. But I read in a book at one point, I can't remember which book, but they said that meditation isn't the act of meditating. It is being within a meditative state. And that a meditative state can be in many different things. You can achieve a meditative state riding down a mountain on your mountain bike. You can achieve a meditative state on the jujitsu mats. You can achieve a meditative state on the shooting range. There's lots of places that you can find those states. But it is an act. You have to intentionally find that state because it doesn't just happen. A lot of times I've actually heard people say that, they'll just let themselves drift off. And that's not in a meditative state because you're not intentionally doing what you're doing. You're just allowing your brain to wander.
Yeah, you're phasing out. You're powering
Exactly.
down.
Versus intentionally being
Yeah,
in that
executing.
moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um,
There's two things there that I'd like
yeah.
to just mention, just to add not clarity, but just get people thinking about it. Is you'd said, you're out on the range and you're trying to meditate, maybe on the range or on a mountain bike or wherever. And so I think that meditation is two things. It is the active pursuit of meditating,
Mhm.
and it is the active filtering of all white noise. And so if you get on the range and you're trying to enter into the flow state, you're actively pursuing a state of no mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's an action that you're pursuing, trying to clear your head. But you've also got to actively reject all the white noise.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm suggesting is this: if you want to pursue state of no mind, that's a one-dimensional effort to getting a state of no mind. But in reality, you'll never achieve a state of no mind by target locking on the outcome, because the white noise will always follow along with you. So you've got to counter the white noise while executing against the outcome, which is state of no mind. And
Mm-hmm.
you've got to do it in parallel. You can't, maybe when you initially start, you can flip flop between, oh, stupid white noise, get rid of that. Oh, yeah, what was I doing? Oh, yeah, I was state of no mind. Oh, stupid white noise. And you might flip back and forth, trying to narrow it down to a more autonomous process eventually, which is sit on the tree stump, shut up,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's done. But you can't do that on day one. You've got to really be cognizant of crippling the white noise that wants to keep bubbling back in your head. Well, when that guy said, and then that clerk said that thing to me. I mean, you got to get rid of it. You can't enter
Mm-hmm.
into a state of no mind if you're still focused on 27 years ago or 16 years ago or 1 year ago, when the clerk flipped you off as the very last item before you stepped off a base.
Yeah. You know what? I was likening it to the sword and shield. You know, when you see the armored, the typical image of the armored knight with the sword and the shield, right? Or the whichever way the camera angle is working right now. Anyway, um, but you have to be. It's not an all-out offensive,
No,
right?
correct.
Of like you're not just actively attacking state
Correct.
of no mind. You have to be defending and attacking at the same time, and it's part of the deal. And
Well,
it is
you've got to think like a participant in your own life.
yes,
You know, it's not a passive unfolding. Life will take care of itself for sure. Life will unfold in front of you for sure. And if you're not shaping how it's unfolding, it'll turn into whatever.
yeah,
But if you're an active participant in shaping your real time, it'll turn into something that you're now in charge of.
yeah.
Two different outcomes.
It's very true. It is very true. This is one of the tricks. I was also thinking about this is that when you're in the mob, it's very difficult to be aligned with yourself and be able to take time to go and meditate or find a meditative state or seek that because you need the quiet, right? You need to be able to. Well, you can't say you need the quiet.
No, you don't.
It's
It's handy
helpful to
if you do.
helpful to have quiet, yeah,
Mm.
and to be a part of nature or to find a spot that you can uh, look for, look inward singularly. But the trick is that in life, especially in North America, man, there is noise everywhere, and that being able to find those spots, even amongst noise, sometimes is required. Sometimes you have to take the time to um, not just intentionally look inwards, but to intentionally separate yourself from whichever mob you're a part of. That
It's
mob could be
mandatory.
mandatory, you say?
It's mandatory. You have to
Yeah.
figure it out. You have to figure out how to separate yourself from the noise. I spoke about it yesterday,
Hmm.
and it's a classic case of, if you're in the military, and here this is why I said what I said yesterday, because it was a reflection on how busy the military can be. We're always churning,
Yeah.
always thinking, always plotting, always planning, always assessing, always predicting, always. The moment that the patrol stops, you're already pre-planning what's next.
Yep.
You're determining threats and risks and this and that, and your head is constantly going. You never shut up. Even in the silence of a ninja stealth patrol, you just never shut up.
Yep.
It's always real-time assessment and risk management. Always. It never shuts up. So maybe if I sat down and thought about it a long time, I might be able to imagine a time where I literally zenned out, but I can't think of one because it was never taught to me. I didn't know it existed.
Hmm.
I was so busy being busy that I thought busy was not only normal, it was mandatory because everyone around me was hustling and I was
Yep.
hustling. We were all hustling and everyone was on it, sharp as a razor, bop, 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 banging it all out because we're on it. We never shut down. We were
Hmm.
always dialing the rotary dial to 11. So where do you learn it in the military? I think there's lots of opportunities in the military, even when things are a little crazy. Even if you only get 30 seconds to yourself squatting down or whatever after a patrol or before the patrol, there's time in the military where you can zen out, state of no mind, do a reset, see what's going on in you, get a better sense of who you are and how you're going to be impacted in the future by the way that you're feeling in the real time. The trick is someone's got to tell you that you can do it. And then you've got to try it. And then you've got to see what it feels like. And then you've got to see if you learned anything. And then you've got to decide, am I going to do that again? And
Hmm.
if you think, nah, I'm not really into it, that's a mistake. And it'd be my job as a senior NCO to look at you and say, that's a mistake. Give it another try. Let me know what you think next time. Let's talk next week. Let's talk next month. Blah, blah, blah. But it's
Yeah.
leadership or the troops around the person who isn't thinking, isn't trying to be a low rent philosopher. It's our job to encourage that kind of thoughtful action, to encourage higher intellectualism, I believe. Listen, I was a dumb infantry guy when I first started out. Day one, I was dumb as a brick. I mean, the infantry.
Just chewing on them crayons. Yeah,
Most of us
yeah.
eat crayons,
Yeah.
but you got to find a way to not eat crayons. And then you got to find a way to like not hand out crayons to the troops. Then you got to find out a way to like get everyone smarter around you. That's your job as a leader, I
Yeah.
believe.
I heard this great I think it was an article I was reading actually. Now that I'm really diving into my memory on this one, but it was it was a reporter who was talking about some time that they spent in uh, a Buddhist temple somewhere, and they had gotten used to the time there. So when they were going to meditate, there was the chimes and
Oh
the
yeah, yeah.
chanting
Yeah,
and
yeah,
the
the
like,
little signals.
absolutely, to kind of hit every marker. And then the reporter went home and tried to continue on doing the same things, but was constantly distracted. Traffic noises
No
and the house
chimes.
creaks and no chimes and things aren't happening the way they're supposed to, right? So they were in a mob and then they separated themselves from that mob, but tried to keep doing the same things and it wasn't working. And it wasn't until they came to realize that those noises that were distracting at the beginning of the practice when they were at the temple,
Right.
because they weren't used to that being the trigger to go, oh, right, then I do this, and then I do this, and then I do that. And while you were talking, it made me think about that, a really good leader is going to, first off, tell you to do something more than once, because
For sure.
you can't decide, you can't make a very consistent um, decision about anything from one experience.
Correct.
That's just not okay. But
That's called not a trend.
exactly, that is one experience. It is an isolated incident.
N
That's
equals
really it.
one is what it's
N
called.
equals
Yeah.
one. Yeah. But the thing that I took out of that was the fact that if you have an experience and it's not good, okay, try it again, but under different control situations, right?
Hmm.
If you and then again, but you're learning from each one of those, and then you get to a point where you go, yeah, that's not for me. Like, I could finish this year of writing in this journal. And there are many other people that say journals are the way to go, and you should write in a journal
Right.
every day, and you could be part of that mob. But I might make it through this year and go, yeah, you know what? I put some work into it. I really tried to enjoy this, and go, it's just not for me. I didn't really gain what it was that I thought I was going to gain out of this.
You did. You
I
just
did.
yeah, you did.
Yeah.
And you will.
And I will.
And
Yeah.
at the end of the year, you might say, "Ah, I didn't really get as much out of it as I thought." Maybe you didn't, but
Hmm.
you gained. And that was the entire purpose of it.
Exactly.
And it's not a matter of categorizing, wow, but I finished the journal and nobody hung a gold Olympian medal around my neck.
Yeah.
What? I thought I'd be an Olympian by the time I finished this
Mhm.
journal. Nope, but you're smarter and you know yourself better. You're
It
more
says
thoughtful.
stoic. I'm now a stoic.
That's
Haha.
right. Well, it wouldn't be a gold medal. Perhaps it might be some form of the green leafy crown around
Ooh, like a
your
pointy hat.
maybe a wizard hat.
That was the point I was going to get at, was the fact that you can put a bunch of work into something and then say, okay, cool, I've learned something. Time to move on, or time to dive further, or yeah, this is cool. I'm going to kind of keep doing it, or there's many, 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 many options.
There are many options. Sadly, there's so many options out there that most people default to the give it a try, whatever. What's
Yeah,
next?
yeah,
That was day 3, bro. You didn't try anything. You quit before you started. And
yeah,
it comes down to that. It's a matter of prioritization. Whatever you're going to do, before you do it, figure out how much you're going to kick its ass.
yeah.
If you enter into something, you're like, whatever, I'm just going to give it a try. Let's see what happens. That is not the approach. The approach is, I think I'll give something a try, something new. I
Mhm.
think I'm going to see where it goes at an 11 out of 10. Otherwise, you're just dabbling. Otherwise, you never even started. You didn't
Yeah,
participate. You're not even a participant. You're a distraction to
yeah.
yourself and those around you. So before you go dabbling all over the place, before you start the first dabble, figure out how much you're in the game.
It goes back to the mob and the philosopher. This is the thing. If you want to be a philosopher, it's going to take you looking up and looking around and being in the philosopher zone, right? But if you want to do something new, you can't stay in the philosopher zone. You have to then kind of get into the mob. You have to get into the mob. You can't stand outside the mob and go, "Ooh, oh yeah, look what they're doing. Cool. Oh, look what they're doing. Cool," without ever actually diving into it, because you don't know. It's just a cursory glance. Like, someone could cursory glance over the collective, and in a moment where you and I are, jibing
Like
each other
right
and go,
now, they're
like
not
right
going to
now,
follow anything that we're
and they're
talking
going to be
about right
like,
now. We're just
"What is
chirping.
happening?"
Yeah,
Right?
what are these fools?
But now, like, if you set a trend, you have to take some time, dive into it, go,
You do.
"Oh, these guys are actually thinking about stuff. They're talking about stuff. They're talking to more than just themselves sometimes," right? Like, you have to be in the mob
You got
to
to give
see
it
what the
some
mob is about.
time.
Exactly,
Everything
some
takes
time.
time. It's all trending. It's trends take time and depending on the circumstances that time can be a minute, it can be a year, but trending is the active observation of an isolated piece of observation so that you can form it against start to finish from now till then. Trending isn't done often enough.
Yeah.
Trending is a thoughtful observation of a timeline in order to see a pattern. I run my life on patterns, always have, always will. And patterns are simply this to me: observe it, trend it, form the pattern, adjust off the pattern. That's how I've run my life for a
Yeah.
freaking long time. Really simple lesson, but a really powerful lesson.
I've just recently started doing it, and you're right. It's not only is it a lesson, but it is a tool. It is a powerful tool that you get to utilize,
Correct.
because now you can determine whether or not something is worth your time, because your time is precious. It is important, but it's only important and precious when you take the time to realize that it is important and precious. Otherwise, it
That's
just
right.
flits away.
Trends will teach you, or patterns will teach you how the world works. And if the world is confusing, or if you feel like, you're hard done by, or whatever the case is, it's just because you're not seeing patterns. You haven't trended, you haven't timelined, you haven't thought, you haven't understood how the world turns. The world turns in a way that most people don't understand. I'm not saying that there's some sort of secret sauce or anything like that, or there's a mystical clan of 12 guys who only understand how the world turns. I'm not saying that. The more you think, the more you know. The more you know, the more you understand, the more you see the patterns, the more it makes sense. And if the whole world is bewildering as a 10-year-old, it's because you haven't had enough skin in the game. That's it. That's all. But as a 10-year-old, if you start paying attention to the details, you trend it out, you start looking for the patterns, well, now you're going to be a smart 11-year-old. And by the time you're 21 years old, you'll be miles ahead of your peers
Yeah.
who aren't paying attention to the patterns in the world all around us all the time.
It is it's an interesting thing when you look back at, say, historical figures, even say philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, or perhaps, you know, Aristotle or Socrates or whatever, whoever you want to talk about in terms of historical figures. Those people made realizations early enough to make changes. They started
True.
speaking about stuff. They started thinking about stuff. They started trending, patterning. They started finding patterns within something to be able to utilize it in a different way, which made them stand out from their peers because their peers were still in the mob, wandering around, bumping into each other, not thinking anything of it. Whereas when you actually take the time to intentionally move forward with your life into what you want to do, you'll set yourself apart.
Well, there's the trick. There's the risk.
That is exactly it. That's the hard part.
The hard part is if you want to improve the mob, whatever that means to whoever's listening to this right now, if you want to improve the mob, you got to keep at least one foot in the mob.
Mm-hmm.
You can't step out of the mob, don a white robe, stand on a podium, and observe the mob.
But I have a 3-day course from
with my wizard hat. And just like Marcus Aurelius wouldn't have done anything like that, it's we'll say someone who's influential in history. At least my observation is this: they kept some skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
At least the ones that I respect. I'm not talking about dusty librarians who've never had skin in the game. I'm talking about a foot in the dirt, and probably a muddy foot, preferably. Someone, again, reading Ryan Flavel's book, they're just finishing it off this morning. There was a little moment in the book where he was talking about he'd just come back from overseas. He'd been back in country for a year, and he was working at a dog and pony booth at the Calgary Stampede where he's demonstrating, all the various radios. This is a radio, that's a radio. And he's just sitting there 8 hours or whatever. You know how that goes.
Oh, yeah.
It sucks. Dog and ponies are the worst because he describes exactly what's worst about them. People coming up and saying, hey, is that a helicopter? Hey, come on, let's go look at the helicopter, kids. And, he's boring because he ain't a helicopter.
Yeah.
And as he sat there baking in the sun, observing society all around him, he says this, and I'm going to paraphrase. You'll have to read the book in order to get the precise words, but it's along these lines. As I watched the crowd go by, what I saw was a lot of fat people getting fatter, a lot of ignorant people proud of their ignorance, a lot of loose women who were trying to convince men in uniform to go out on a date, etc. And so he's looking at society moving in front of him, making the observation that there's a massive chasm between serving your country overseas and the world that we're working for here in Canada, that is just quite happy to walk by at 300 pounds, sucking back 4 corn dogs.
Yep.
With zero understanding of how to spell Afghanistan. They don't care. They just care about pounding back another greasy hot dog.
Yep.
Those are his words, not mine. But those are my beliefs as well.
Yeah.
because anyone who's done any hard thing on behalf of their country, and here's the slippery slope, is when you finish doing that hard thing on behalf of the country and you step back into what I'll call, quote unquote, the regular world and look around, nobody cares.
Nope.
No one even wants to hear. And that's fine, whatever. But it creates a disconnect, a
Yeah.
dissonance of, are you kidding me? I just I just made all of those sacrifices so that you can suck back another corn dog and flip me the bird.
Mhm.
It's not great, and it
No.
causes problems. And so how to reduce that slippery slope? Well, I would say go read Ryan's book and start thinking about these kind of things,
Yeah.
because it doesn't have to be, "What? You just flipped me the bird? Do you know who I am? Do you know what I did? Do you know I served the—" That shouldn't be the response. The
Yeah.
response should be appropriate to the moment, and the only appropriate response requires time,
Yeah.
requires contemplation, not knee-jerk reaction of, "Do you know who I am?" It requires more philosophy than that.
It
Not
does.
only days prior to the event occurring, but in the moment. You're supposed to learn from the moment rather than punching that guy straight between the eyes and then eating his corn dog. Yeah, you gotta take the time to figure out how to manage the situation so that it's a positive outcome rather than a negative outcome, and I know that's difficult,
Mhm.
but that's our job.
Yep. I have said it many times that as the minority here in Canada, as a veteran, it's our responsibility to show the Canadian public what it is. Like, why? What did we do? What was it for? Why did I serve? Why and to tell the stories because they don't hear they don't hear the stories. They hear the sound bites. They hear the news broadcast. They hear the veneer of what it is to do the job. And some of the
Yeah.
questions we used, I'm sure you've gotten this question too. Same thing as I've pretty much heard it from every veteran that's basically every veteran. Did you kill anybody?
Ryan Flavel talks about that
Yeah.
precisely as he's at the Calgary Stampede. "Hey, did you kill someone? Hey, is that a helicopter?" And then they walk.
Yeah. It's
I
a
mean, those are his words.
it's a painful realization to be like they don't actually care
Correct. Now,
in
here's the
one
thing.
moment. Yep.
Here's the thing, and this
Yep.
is super important. I know we're gonna be wrapping up here in a sec. So, as a veteran, if you find
Mhm.
yourself in that situation, you now got a branching point. You either look that person in the eye and say, "Hey, you know what? You're an idiot."
Yeah.
Or you say, "No, that's a good question, and I'd like to let you know that that's kind of not an appropriate question for any veteran.
Mhm.
And here's why." Or, "I just want to let you know that it's kind of funny that you asked that question because everyone asks that question, but we don't like to talk about those kind of things as veterans."
Yeah.
And so it's our opportunity to either get someone angry at all veterans or ease someone into a conversation about learning more about veterans.
That's
It's that
exactly it.
classic branching point of, do you want to poison the well, or do you want to grab a cup of water and give that person a glass of water and say, "That's a good question."
Yeah.
And it only takes a handful of well poisoners to ruin it for all veterans.
100%. It goes in the same line of gatekeeping, goes in the same line of keeping others out. That's all you're doing is you're
Yeah,
keeping people at arm's length or farther or whatever. You're just keeping them out of the conversation rather than being a part of the conversation. And it's tough. Again, what you got to do,
it's tough.
strip
No
the
one does it
ego.
right.
Well,
No
just
one, no one gets out and does it perfect.
exactly. And you got to strip the ego away.
Yeah,
It does because that's not what it's about. It's not about you.
not at all.
A single person's ignorance of a particular topic is not about
Unless I'm getting a free
you.
corn dog.
Maybe. I mean, you could ask and they might give you one. Or but again, it's part of being part of the conversation, and being a part of the conversation it requires intention. Same thing we were just
It
talking about,
does.
right? And being open to the conversation, actively listening, doing all those things, being the philosopher within the mob.
Yeah, understand that you're representing the mob to some degree,
Yeah.
but try to elevate yourself so that you're adding a little more, value added.
Yeah. Some nuance, some, dare to say, some educational benefit, perhaps.
We're all trying to make the world better, aren't we?
That's the plan. I mean,
That's the plan.
and that's the thing is, as every day we get to learn, we get to build, we get to grow here on the collective. We can join together and learn from one another. This is what we do. So, at about an hour now, Sean, any final points? Any last thoughts on the mob,
Nope.
the philosopher, the patrol, just anything?
No, I mean, one of my favorite songs when I was back in the basic infantry, when I was just a young pup,
Hmm.
was Black Sabbath's The Mob Rules. I listen to that
Mm,
damn near every
that's a
day.
good one.
It's a classic from the
Hmm.
movie Heavy Metal. And so The Mob Rules, I've cranked that so many times. And back then, what it meant to me was the mob rules. But now when I look back at it, I see it as the mob rules if they've got a good ruler.
Hmm.
And the mob doesn't need a ruler, but it sure helps if there's a benevolent, wise, caring, shaping, good guidance
Hmm.
ruler. So the mob does rule with a good ruler, is
Yeah.
what I'll leave it at.
That's a great way of putting it. I think that's a great way to end it. We'll talk to y'all tomorrow. Make sure that before you leave this chat, you again like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so that you can join us every day here on the collective. Chimo, y'all.
Chimo.